I was making soup when my daughter-in-law hit me in the head with a ladle. Who cooks like this? You are incompetent, Linda screamed while I felt the hot metal burn against my temple. My son Michael, sitting in the living room, simply turned up the volume on the television as if he did not hear, as if it did not matter. 5 minutes later, a deafening crash came from the kitchen. Pots placed my body against the floor. Michael ran over there and froze in the doorframe. "Mom, what did you do?" he whispered, looking at me lying among the rubble of my own dignity. But what none of them knew at that moment was that I still had one last card hidden. A card that would change everything. My name is Helen. I am 71 years old, with hands worn by decades of kneading bread for others, and a heart that until recently blindly believed in family loyalty. How foolish I was. How blind I was. 6 months ago, I buried my husband Henry. 50 years of marriage evaporated one afternoon in April when his heart decided to give up while he was watering the geraniums in the backyard. I found him there on his knees with the hose still dripping water onto his brown shoes. From that day on, my world became silence and yellowing photographs. I was left alone in a house that was too big, surrounded by memories that hurt to touch. Michael, my only son, insisted that I move in with him and his wife. "You cannot be alone, Mom. At your age, it is dangerous." He sounded worried on the phone. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. So I packed my life into 4 suitcases and left behind the house where I raised my son, where Henry and I danced in the kitchen on Sundays, where every corner held pieces of us. Michael's house was modern, with shiny floors and furniture that looked like it came out of a magazine. Linda, my daughter-in-law, received me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Welcome, Helen," she said, without calling me mother-in-law, without calling me mom. Just Helen, as if I were a stranger. From the first day, I knew I had made a mistake, but it was too late to go back. I settled into the guest room, a small room at the end of the hall, with a window that looked out onto a dark alley. I hung Henry's photographs on the wall, arranged my gray dresses in the closet, and tried to make myself invisible. That was my new role to exist without getting in the way. Morning started early. I woke up at 6, made coffee, made breakfast scrambled eggs, toast, freshly squeezed orange juice. Michael came down first, always in a hurry, always looking at his phone. "Thanks, Mom," he muttered without looking up. Linda appeared later wrapped in a green silk robe, with her hair perfectly combed even at that hour. She sat at the table and reviewed every detail of my work with critical eyes. "The coffee is watery," she would say, "or the eggs have too much salt." Never a thank you, never an acknowledgement. I just nodded, smiled, and tried again the next day. I wanted to be useful. I wanted them to need me. I wanted to believe that I still had a place in my son's life. Days turned into weeks. I cleaned, cooked, washed clothes. I became a shadow moving through the house, picking up crumbs, folding towels, organizing spaces that no one else saw. Linda worked from home, always on important calls, always stressed. When something went wrong in her day, I was the easiest target. "Why did you leave this here?" She yelled at me, pointing to a cup I had forgotten on the side table. "You cannot do anything right." Michael was present in those moments, but he never said anything. He just looked away as if it were not his problem, as if I were not his mother. There were nights when I stayed awake listening to the wall clock tick every second. I wondered what I had done wrong. Where had I failed as a mother? Why did my son allow them to treat me like this? Tears fell silently on my pillow, and I dried them before dawn because I could not show weakness. I could not give them reasons to get rid of me. But that afternoon, while I was preparing the vegetable soup that Michael liked so much when he was a child, something broke.
I was cutting carrots, focused on making everything perfect, when Linda entered the kitchen like a hurricane.
"What are you doing?" She asked with that sharp voice I knew too well. "Soup for dinner," I replied softly without turning around. "Michael's favorite recipe." She approached, looked at the pot, and her face twisted in disgust. "This looks like pig food. How much salt did you put in? Are you trying to poison us?" Her words were daggers. I tried to explain, but she did not want to listen. She took the ladle from the pot, and before I could react, she smashed it against my head. The blow left me stunned.
I felt the heat of the metal, the boiling liquid running down my hair, the throbbing pain in my temple. Who cooks like this? "You're incompetent!" Linda screamed, her voice resonating throughout the house. I staggered, holding on to the edge of the stove. From the living room, I heard the television. Michael was there. He could hear everything, and he just turned up the volume. That was the moment something inside me turned off. The physical pain was nothing compared to the betrayal of that silence. My son, the boy I carried in my womb, whom I raised with every ounce of love I had, chose the sound of a television show over my suffering. I stood there, leaning against the stove, with the ladle still dripping soup at my feet. Linda looked at me with those eyes full of contempt, waiting for me to apologize, to kneel, to beg for forgiveness for existing. But I could only think of Michael, about how the volume of the television had increased just when she screamed, about how he knew exactly what was happening and chose not to see it. "You are pathetic," Linda spat, crossing her arms. "Look at this mess. You are not even good for making a damn soup. I do not know why Michael insisted on bringing you here. You are a burden, a useless woman who just takes up space." Every word was a slap. I wanted to respond, to defend myself, but my voice was trapped somewhere deep in my throat. I tried to clean, to pick up the drops of soup from the floor, but my hands were shaking. My head throbbed where the ladle had hit. Linda left the kitchen with furious steps, and I was left alone between the steam and the silence. 5 minutes. That was all it took for me to make a decision. I looked at the pots lined up on the stove. I looked at the dishes piled in the rack. I looked at that kitchen I had cleaned every day for months, trying to earn a place in this house that was never mine, and something inside me simply exploded. It was not planned. It was not calculated. It was pure survival instinct. I took the biggest pot, the one containing the soup she had criticized so much, and emptied it into the sink. The hot liquid went down the drain with an almost violent sound. Then I took another pot and another one. I let them fall, some to the floor, others against the kitchen counter. The plate slipped from my hands. The cups smashed. The silverware flew through the air. It was a chaotic, crashing sound, liberating, necessary. I heard Michael's hurried steps. "What was that?" he shouted from the hallway. When he reached the kitchen, he stopped dead. His face palled, seeing me there, surrounded by overturned pots, spilled soup, broken plates. There was a trickle of blood on my temple where the ladle had hit me. "Mom, what did you do?" he whispered, but he did not come closer. He did not touch me. He just looked at me as if I were guilty of everything. Linda appeared behind him, and her expression of horror quickly transformed into fury. "She is crazy. Your mother is completely crazy," she shrieked, pointing at me as if I were a dangerous animal. "Look at this mess. She destroyed my whole kitchen. Call someone. Michael, this woman needs to be locked up." Michael looked at me. I looked back at him, waiting for him to say something to defend me, to at least ask why I had done this. But he just shook his head, disappointed, ashamed. "Mom, why do you do these things?" Why, I repeated, and my voice sounded hoarse-broken. "Your wife hit me with a boiling ladle. Michael, she hit me, and you turned up the volume on the television." The words came out like knives. He blinked, confused, or maybe pretending confusion. I did not hear her, Mom. I did not know what. Liar. The word floated between us like poison. You were there. You heard everything, and you chose to do nothing. Linda stepped between us, her face red with rage. "I am not going to tolerate this. I am not going to live under the same roof as this ungrateful old woman who respects nothing. Michael, you have to choose. Either she goes or I go." The silence that followed was worse than any scream. I looked at my son, begging him with my eyes to choose me, to remember who raised him, who spent sleepless nights when he had a fever, who worked 2 jobs to pay for his college. But Michael looked at the floor hands in his pockets, defeated. "I am sorry, Mom," he muttered finally. "But I think that I think it is better if you look for another place. This is not working. You are causing problems. You need to leave." The world stopped. My heart stopped. Everything stopped. "Are you kicking me out?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. "Your wife hits me and you kick me out." "It is not like that, Mom. It is just that Linda and I need our space. You need your independence."
It will be better for everyone.
He spoke with rehearsed phrases, empty words that someone else had put in his mouth. My son was no longer there. Only a stranger with his face remained. When I asked, feeling the tears starting to burn behind my eyes, "Tomorrow morning, I will call you a taxi. You can stay in a hotel while you find something permanent."
I will help you with some expenses. At the beginning, he was firing me like an employee. He did not even have the courage to look me in the eyes. That night, I did not sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at Henry's photograph, wondering what he would say if he could see me now. I packed my things slowly, folding every garment with care, as if external order could contain the internal chaos. At dawn, I heard the taxi horn. Michael was waiting for me at the door with $200 in his hand. "So you can get settled," he said, unable to hold my gaze. I did not hug him. I did not say goodbye.
I just took the money, loaded my suitcases, and left that house without looking back. The taxi driver asked me where I wanted to go. I had no answer. "To any cheap hotel," I told him finally. He took me to a place on the outskirts, one of those roadside motel with flashing neon signs and carpets that smelled of dampness. The room cost $30 a night. I did the math mentally. With $200, I could survive less than a week. The hotel room was small, with stained beige walls and a bed that squeaked every time I moved. There was a window looking out to the parking lot where cars entered and left at all hours of the night. The neon light from the sign blinked every few seconds, dyeing everything in a sickly reddish glow. I sat on that bed, and for the first time in months, I cried without holding back. They were not silent tears. They were deep sobs coming from somewhere dark in my chest. Years of accumulated pain, of swallowed humiliations, of unspoken words. I cried for Henry, who had gone, leaving me alone in a world I no longer recognized. I cried for Michael, the boy who once hugged me and called me his hero. I cried for myself, for the woman I had been, and who now did not know who she was. When the tears dried, only emptiness remained. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror under the cruel fluorescent light. A 71-year-old woman stared back at me. Deep wrinkles, puffy eyes, messy gray hair. There was a purple mark on my temple where the ladle had hit me. I touched the wound gently and felt how the physical pain was almost a relief compared to the other pain, the one that had no name. The days began to blur. I stayed in the room all the time watching television without really seeing it, eating the minimum. I only went out to buy something from the vending machine in the hallway. Saltine crackers, instant coffee, granola bars.
Once the machine swallowed my last $2 without giving me anything in return,
I stood there watching the money disappear and felt it was a perfect metaphor for my life. I sent messages to Michael. At first, I tried to be dignified. "Son, I need to talk to you." Nothing. Then I tried to be more direct. "Michael, I am running out of money." Silence. Finally, I stopped trying. The messages were marked as read, but there was never an answer. It was like screaming into a bottomless pit. A week later, the money ran out. The hotel clerk, a man in his 40s with a prominent belly and tired eyes, knocked on my door.
"Ma'am, I need you to pay or vacate the room."
His voice was not cruel, just professional, indifferent. I explained my situation. I begged him for one more day, but he just shook his head. "I am sorry, ma'am. Those are the rules." I packed my suitcases again. 4 suitcases that now weighed like corpses. I dragged them through the parking lot under a burning sun, not knowing where to go. I walked for hours. My feet hurt. My hands had blisters from carrying so much weight. But I kept moving because stopping meant accepting that I had nowhere to arrive. I ended up in a square near downtown. There were metal benches under the trees, pigeons pecking at crumbs, children playing on the swings. I sat on a secluded bench and watched life continue as if I did not exist. A woman passed with her small daughter. The girl looked at me with curiosity, but her mother pulled her hand and sped up as if poverty were contagious. That was my first night sleeping on the street. I did not really sleep. I sat hugging my purse, jumping at every noise. There were other homeless people in the square, men mostly, who huddled under cardboard. One of them approached and offered me a piece of hard bread.
"Eat it, Grandma. You have to take care of yourself here."
I took the bread with shaking hands and thanked him. He nodded and walked away, dragging a bag full of cans. The days turned into a routine of survival. I looked for food in dumpsters behind restaurants. At first, I was disgusted. I was ashamed, but hunger is stronger than pride. I found bread from the day before, bruised fruits, leftovers people had left on their plates. I ate hidden in alleys where no one could see me. There was a church a few blocks away where they served soup on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I stood in line with dozens of other people, all with broken stories written on their faces. A young volunteer served me the bowl with a compassionate smile that made me feel even smaller. "God bless you, ma'am," she said. I just nodded, unable to form words. The nights were the worst, cold, long, full of fear. I lay on the bench with my suitcases around me, using my sweater as a blanket.
I heard sirens in the distance, occasional screams, the constant rumble of the city that never slept.
I thought about Michael lying in his comfortable bed in his heated house while I shivered under the stars. I wondered if he thought of me, if he cared, if he knew his mother was sleeping on the street. One early morning, a police officer woke me with his flashlight. "Ma'am, you cannot be here. You have to move." I explained that I had nowhere to go. He sighed, tired of hearing stories like mine. "There's a shelter 6 blocks away. Go there." He gave me the address and left. I tried to go, but the shelter was full. "Come back tomorrow early," they told me. Always tomorrow, always waiting. Never now. 2 weeks went by like that, or maybe 3. I lost count. The days blended into a fog of exhaustion and hopelessness. My clothes were dirty, my hair greasy, my skin covered in grime. I had become one of those invisible people that others avoided looking at.
A statistic, a shadow. But in the middle of all that suffering, something strange happened. I started to remember things I had forgotten. I remembered that before marrying Henry, I wanted to study literature. I remembered that I once won a poetry contest in school. I remembered that there was a time when I had dreams of my own before becoming a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a shadow. One afternoon, while searching through my suitcases for some clean clothes, I found an envelope I did not remember packing. It was old, yellowed with my name written in Henry's unmistakable handwriting. My heart skipped a beat. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a letter and several folded documents. The letter began with "My dear Helen." I recognized immediately when he had written it. It was from 2 years ago when Henry had been hospitalized for pneumonia. I thought it had just been a scare, but now I understood that he had faced his own mortality. If you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. The letter said, "Forgive me for not telling you everything in life. I always wanted to protect you from money worries, from business, from legal complexities. But now I see it was a mistake to keep you in the dark." My eyes filled with tears as I read. Henry's voice resonated in every word. "During the last 30 years, I made investments, small at first, then bigger. I bought properties when no one wanted them in neighborhoods that later increased in value. I saved every extra penny. I did it all thinking of our future, of your security. I never told you because I did not want you to worry, because I wanted to surprise you in our old age
with the peace of knowing you would be well taken care of." My breathing accelerated. I unfolded the documents accompanying the letter. They were deeds, property titles, investment certificates. My eyes scanned the papers, unable to believe what they saw.
An apartment building downtown, another on the north side. Shares in companies' bank accounts with numbers that seemed impossible. My hands shook so much the papers almost fell to the ground. I read every document once, twice, 3 times, trying to process the information. There were 13 properties in my name. 13. Complete buildings,
apartments, commercial spaces. And one of those addresses was painfully familiar. 452 Magnolia Street. It was the building where Michael and Linda lived. The building where they had kicked me out, where I had been humiliated, beaten, and discarded. Like trash was mine. It had been mine this whole time. I felt something churn in my stomach. It was not just surprise. It was a mixture of disbelief, pain, and something darker starting to grow slowly. Henry's letter continued on the second page. Contact the lawyer, Robert Miller. He has all the original documents and will help you with everything. His number is at the end of this letter. Helen, my love, never let anyone make you feel less than you are. You are a strong, capable, valuable woman. If anyone treats you badly, remember you have the power to defend yourself. I loved you every day of my life. Take care. Your Henry. I sat on that bench in the square, surrounded by my suitcases, holding the proof that I was not the destitute woman everyone saw passing by. I was the owner of a patrimony valued in millions of dollars. Millions. And I had been sleeping on the street, eating from the trash, begging for crumbs. The irony was so brutal, I did not know whether to laugh or cry. I did both. I laughed like a mad woman while tears ran down my dirty cheeks. People passing by looked at me with pity or fear, moving away from the crazy old lady in the square. But I was no longer that woman. Or maybe I still was. But now I knew something they did not know. I searched through my things until I found a public phone that still worked. I dialed lawyer Robert Miller's number with trembling fingers. It rang 3 times before a professional voice answered. Miller and Associates, how can I help you? I need to speak with lawyer Robert Miller. It is about Henry Smith. My voice sounded hoarse, broken from weeks of barely using it. There was a pause. Who is speaking? Please, I am Helen Smith, Henry's widow. Another pause, longer this time. Mrs. Smith, we have been trying to contact you for months. Where are you? Mr. Miller needs to see you urgently. I gave them the address of the square. They told me they would send a car in less than 30 minutes. I went back to my bench and waited, clinging to those documents as if they were the only real thing in the world. Maybe they were. The car that arrived was black, elegant, with tinted windows. The driver got out and looked at me with a neutral, professional expression, as if picking up homeless women was part of his daily routine. Mrs. Smith. I nodded. He loaded my suitcases into the trunk and opened the back door for me. The interior smelled of leather and expensive air freshener. I felt dirty, out of place, but I did not care anymore. The law firm was in the financial district in one of those glass buildings reflecting the sky. We went up in a silent elevator to the 15th floor. The receptionist looked me up and down, but said nothing. She just pointed down a hallway. Lawyer Miller is waiting for you in his office. Robert Miller was a man in his 50s with perfectly combed gray hair and thin-rimmed glasses. He stood up when I entered and for a second, I saw a surprise on his face seeing my state, but he quickly replaced it with a professional expression. "Mrs. Smith, please take a seat. Can I offer you water coffee?" "Water, please."
My voice was barely a whisper. He poured a glass from a crystal pitcher and handed it to me. I drank as if I had gone days without water, which in a way was true. "Mrs. Smith, we have tried to locate you since Mr. Henry passed away. We left messages at your old house. We sent letters. Your son told us you had moved, but did not provide us with contact information." "My son." The words came out bitter. "My son kicked me out of his house 3 weeks ago. I have been living on the street." The lawyer frowned. "I understand. I am very sorry to hear that. But I want you to know that your financial situation is very solid. Your husband was an extremely foresightful man. Have you reviewed the documents he left you?" I took the crumpled envelope from my purse and put it on the desk. "I found them yesterday. I do not understand everything they say." Robert reviewed them carefully. "So I see these are duplicates. I have the original certified ones here."
Let me explain your current situation, Mrs. Smith. You are the owner of 13 properties in the city, valued at approximately $8 million in total. Additionally, you have investments in funds and stocks worth an additional $2 million. Your husband also left you 3 bank accounts with available cash of approximately $500,000. The numbers floated in the air like something unreal. $10 million. $10 million. And I had been looking for food in dumpsters. "It cannot be real," I whispered. "It is completely real, Mrs. Smith. And there is something else you should know. One of the buildings you own is on Magnolia Street, number 452. According to our records, your son, Michael Smith, and his wife, Linda, occupy apartment 301 in that building." "That is correct." I nodded slowly. "That is correct. Then you should know that they have been living there under a reduced rent contract your husband granted them 5 years ago. They paid barely $400 a month for an apartment that would be worth $2,500 on the market. It was a family favor Mr. Henry granted them. $400. Michael was paying $400 to live in a luxury apartment thanks to his father's generosity. And he had kicked me out to the street. He had left me with nothing. The lawyer continued talking, explaining details about taxes, property management, but I was barely listening. My mind was processing something else. "Can I cancel that contract?" I asked, suddenly interrupting him. Robert stopped and looked at me intently. "You are the owner, Mrs. Smith. You can do whatever you wish with your properties. However, there are legal procedures we must follow. You cannot simply kick them out without notice. I do not want to kick them out yet." The words came out cold, calculated. I want them to adjust their rent to the market price. $2,500, you said. Let them pay that. The lawyer nodded slowly.
That is within your rights. We would have to notify them 30 days in advance about the change in contract terms. Are you sure you want to proceed? Completely sure. Robert took notes on his computer. Very well. I will prepare the necessary documents. Now, Mrs. Smith, there are more immediate matters we must attend to. Your housing situation, for example. You have several options. You can move into any of your properties that are vacant, or I can help you find a temporary place while you decide what to do. I want to see the other buildings, all of them. I want to know exactly what I have. Of course, we can organize visits starting tomorrow. Meanwhile, let me arrange a hotel room for you, an appropriate place where you can rest and recover. He stood up and made a call. In minutes, everything was coordinated. A 5-star hotel, downtown executive suite. Everything paid from my own account. Before I left, Robert handed me a bank card. This has access to one of your checking accounts. There is $50,000 available for immediate expenses. Use what you need. And Mrs. Smith, one more thing. Your husband asked me to tell you something if you ever came to see me under difficult circumstances. He made me promise him. He took a sealed envelope from a drawer. He told me textually, if my Helen comes to you beaten by life, give her this and tell her, I always knew she was stronger than she believed she was. I took the envelope with hands that no longer shook so much. I opened it right there in front of Lawyer Robert. It was another letter from Henry. This one shorter, written in black ink on thick paper. My love, if you are reading this, it means someone hurt you enough for you to seek help. I know your pride. I know how hard it is for you to ask for anything. But I want you to know one thing. I built all this for you. Every property, every investment, every penny saved was thinking of the day when I would no longer be there and you needed to defend yourself. Do not let anyone, not even our own blood, make you feel small. You are giant, Helen. You always were. Now prove it. Tears ran down my cheeks as I read. Robert had the delicacy to look away, pretending to check some papers. I folded the letter fully and put it with the other one. Henry had known. Somehow he had known that one day I would need this, that I would need a shield armor, a castle of my own. The hotel was everything my life had stopped being. Soft carpet sheets that smelled of lavender, a bathroom with a marble tub. I stood in the middle of the suite for several minutes just looking. It seemed unreal. 24 hours ago, I was sleeping on a park bench. Now I was in a room that costs $300 a night. The first thing I did was take a bath. I filled the tub with hot water to the brim and submerged myself completely. The water turned dark with the grime of weeks. I scrubbed my skin until it hurt. I washed my hair 3 times. I removed every trace of the street from my body. When I got out, I wrapped myself in a white robe hanging behind the door. It was so soft, it almost made me cry again. I ordered room service, soup, freshly baked bread, roasted chicken salad, dessert. When the food arrived on a cart with a white tablecloth. I sat down to eat slowly, savoring every bite. It was not just food. It was dignity. It was power. It was proof that I still existed as something more than a shadow. That night, I slept 12 hours straight. I slept without startling, without fear, without cold. When I woke up, the sun was coming through the curtains, and for a moment, I did not remember where I was. Then everything returned. The documents, the money, the properties, my new reality.
During the next few days, Robert took me to see each of my properties, apartment buildings, commercial spaces, even a small shopping plaza on the south side. Each place represented years of Henry's silent work investments, made with patience and vision. He explained how everything worked: the rental contracts, the maintenance, the monthly income. I listened and took notes like a diligent student. The net income from all your properties totals approximately $45,000 a month. He told me one day while we reviewed reports in his office after taxes and maintenance expenses. There is an annual income of around $400,000. That is without touching the principal capital, $400,000 a year. And I had been begging for a bowl of soup at the church. The irony remained brutal. But now, there was something else. There was a plan forming in my mind. A cold, calculated, patient plan, Robert. I need us to make some changes, I told him one afternoon, but I need them to be done discreetly without anyone knowing it is me behind them. He leaned back in his chair, intrigued.
What kind of changes? First, the building on Magnolia Street. I want to increase my son's rent to market price, as we said. But I also want you to review all the other contracts in that building. If there are other special arrangements, reduced prices, favors being granted. I want everything back to normal rates. Everyone. I want that building to operate like a real business, not a charity organization. Robert nodded and took notes. It can be done. Anything else, I want to buy new clothes. I want to change my appearance. And I want a business name, something to use to sign documents to appear on contracts. I do not want anyone to know Helen Smith is the owner of all this. We can create a legal entity, an LLC. We choose a name, and all documents are signed under that name.
You will be the silent beneficiary. It is perfectly legal and very common in real estate.
Perfect.
Call it Heritage Holdings. During the next 2 weeks, I transformed. I went to beauty salons where they cut and dyed my hair, covering the gray with an elegant chestnut. I went to boutiques where attentive staff helped me choose clothes that fit me well, that made me look like the wealthy woman I now was. Pearl gay dresses, tailored suits in earth tone tones, dark green silk blouses, nothing flashy. Everything with class. I bought new glasses with modern frames. I got a manicure. I learned to use a little makeup to cover the deepest wrinkles. I was not becoming someone else. It was finding the Helen who had been buried under years of silent service.
Robert taught me to review financial reports, to understand account statements, to make business decisions. I learned fast, discovering a part of me that never had the chance to develop. I had spent 50 years cooking and cleaning, but my mind was still sharp, capable, hungry for knowledge. "You have a talent for this," Robert told me one day. "Your husband chose his investments well, but you have an instinct for seeing opportunities. It is natural in you." Maybe it was. Maybe it always had been, but no one had ever given me the chance to discover it. Henry had been a good man, a loving husband, but even he had kept me in ignorance about finances, believing he was protecting me. Now I understood that true power did not come from being protected, but from having the tools to protect myself. The rent increase notifications were sent to all tenants of the building on Magnolia Street, signed by Heritage Holdings, legally represented by Miller and Associates. The increases were justified. They were within legal limits, but they were significant, especially for those who had been paying reduced rates for years. Robert informed me of the reactions. Some tenants called furious, others tried to negotiate. "There is one apartment in particular that has called 7 times, he told me one afternoon. "Number 301, a certain Michael Smith. He says he has a special contract with the previous owner. That this must be a mistake." "It is not a mistake," I replied with a calm voice. "Tell him the special contract expired with the death of Mr. Henry Smith. Now he must pay full rate or vacate. He is asking to speak with the owner directly. Tell him the owner is not available. All communications must be done through you." Days passed. Robert kept me informed. "Mr. Smith is trying to get a loan to cover the new rent amount. Apparently, he and his wife are living beyond their means. They have credit card debts, a financed car. The rent increase is putting significant pressure on their finances." Good. The word came out cold, without emotion. I did not feel satisfaction exactly, but not guilt either. I was seeing the natural consequences of the decisions Michael had made. He had chosen a wife who spent more than they earned. He had chosen to live with luxuries he could only afford thanks to his father's generosity. He had chosen to kick his mother out to the street. Now he was seeing the price of those choices. But I was not finished. There were other threads to pull, other levers to move. Linda worked as an independent consultant from home. I investigated a little using resources Robert provided me. I discovered that one of her main clients rented space in another of my properties in the Sun Plaza shopping center. Robert, this client renting suite 203 in Sun Plaza. How much do they pay? He checked his files. 200 monthly. It is a large space. Good business. They always pay on time. Increase their rent to 3,500. That is a very significant increase, Mrs. Smith. They could decide to move. Then let them move. It is my property, and I want to charge what it is worth. The client in Suite 203 did not move, but they did cut costs. One of the first things they cut were contracts with external consultants, including Linda Smith.
Robert informed me almost casually during one of our weekly meetings. By the way, it seems your strategy is having side effects. The business in Sun Plaza canceled several supplier contracts. One of them was with Linda Smith, your daughter-in-law. I said nothing. I just nodded and continued reviewing other documents. But inside, I felt something close to satisfaction. It was not revenge yet. It was justice. It was the universe realigning, taking away unearned privileges, balancing the scale. Weeks passed. I continued living in the hotel, studying, learning, transforming. I enrolled in online courses on property management. I read books on personal finance I never had time to read before. I met with other property owners Robert knew, listening to their stories, absorbing their experience. One afternoon, while drinking coffee on the hotel terrace, Robert called me. "Mrs. Smith, there is a situation you should know about. Your son Michael requested a hearing with the building administration. He is 2 months behind on rent. According to standard policies, we have the right to initiate eviction procedures. How much does he owe? $5,000 total, plus late fees. $6,200 total. $6,200. I could pay it with the money I carried in my purse at that moment, but I would not proceed with the eviction following all legal protocols." "Of course. Are you sure?" "Once we start, the process is public. It is filed in the courts. It will appear on his credit history. I am completely sure." That night, I could not sleep. Not out of guilt or regret, but from a complex mix of emotions I did not know how to name. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at the woman staring back. She no longer looked like the same one who arrived at Robert's firm 2 months ago. This woman had straight shoulders, a steady gaze, a jaw set with determination. This woman did not beg. She did not apologize for existing. This woman collected what she was owed. The following days were a whirlwind of legal activity. Robert kept me updated on every step. The eviction notice was delivered. Michael had 30 days to pay the full debt or vacate the apartment. According to Robert, my son had called the firm every day, sometimes several times a day, demanding to speak with the owner, asking for extensions, offering payment plans. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "What you instructed me, that all policies apply equally to all tenants, that there are no exceptions, that if he cannot pay, he must vacate." Perfect. But there was something else Robert did not know, something I had been investigating on my own. I hired a private investigator, not to spy, but to understand. I needed to know how my son had reached this point. I needed to understand what had happened to the boy I had raised. The report arrived a week later. It was sadder than I expected. Michael earned a decent salary as a sales manager, but Linda spent triple what came in. Credit cards maxed out, personal loans to cover other loans, meals at expensive restaurants 5 times a week, designer clothes she used once and forgot in the closet. A lifestyle built completely on debt and appearances. The investigator also included notes on their relationship. They had public arguments.
Neighbors reported frequent screaming doors, slamming tense silences. Linda blamed Michael for not earning enough money. Michael blamed Linda for spending too much. It was a vicious cycle of resentment and recriminations. I read the whole report twice. A part of me, the part that was still a mother, wanted to intervene. I wanted to call Michael, offer him help, guide him toward better decisions. But the other part, the newer and stronger part, knew that would be a mistake. Michael needed to hit rock bottom. He needed to face the consequences of his choices. Only then could he grow. Besides, he had let me hit rock bottom. He had seen me on his kitchen floor, bleeding, humiliated, and had turned up the volume on the television. He had kicked me out to the street with $200 and a vague promise to help me. He had not called to verify if I was alive. He had not asked if I had a place to sleep. He did not care. That was the truth that hurt more than any physical blow. My son had stopped caring about me long before kicking me out of his house. Maybe he never really cared. Maybe he just saw me as an obligation, an inherited burden he had finally found a way to discard. On day 28 of the eviction period, Robert called me.
Michael paid. He got the money somehow. He paid the full $6,200 this morning. I felt something like disappointment. Where did he get the money? I do not know for sure, but I have a theory. There is a new charge on the credit report I monitor. A personal loan from a payday loan company. 32% interest rate. He probably borrowed from there. 32% interest. Michael had traded one debt for a worse one. He had bought time, but he had solved nothing. I understand. Keep monitoring. Let me know of any changes. 2 weeks later, the next rent payment arrived, or rather, it did not arrive. Michael was late again. This time, I did not wait. Start the eviction process immediately, I told Robert. No additional warnings. We apply the rules to the letter. While all this was happening in the legal and financial world, I continued with my personal transformation. I signed up for yoga classes in the mornings, not because I needed exercise, although that helped too, but because I needed to learn to be in silence with myself, to breathe, to exist, without the constant noise of serving others. I also started writing. I bought a brown leather notebook and an elegant pen, and I wrote every night before sleeping. Not exactly a diary, but reflections, thoughts on who I had been, who I was now, who I wanted to be. I wrote about Henry, about our years together, about the things I never told him. I wrote about Michael, about motherhood, about how love is sometimes not enough. One afternoon, while writing on the hotel terrace, an older woman sat at the table next to mine. She must have been 80, maybe more, with perfectly arranged white hair and piercing blue eyes. "Excuse me for bothering you," she said with a soft voice, "but I have seen you here several times, always writing, always alone, and you remind me of myself some years ago." I smiled politely, hoping it was a preamble to sell me something or preach to me. But she just continued. I also went through a transformation late in life. After my husband died, I discovered I did not know who I was without him. I had been a wife, mother, grandmother, but never just myself. So I had to learn it. Is that your case too? Her words hit me with uncomfortable precision. Something like that, I admitted. The hard part is not discovering who you are, she said, looking toward the horizon. The hard part is giving yourself permission to be it, especially when the person you discover is not who others expect you to be. She looked directly at me, but it is worth it, completely worth it. She got up, patted me on the shoulder, and left.
I never knew her name. I never saw her again, but her words stayed with me, resonating somewhere deep. She was right.
The hard part was not discovering who Helen was without Henry, without Michael, without the role of sacrificed mother. The hard part was giving myself permission to be that person. A person who charged what she was worth. A person who did not forgive automatically. A person who set boundaries and made them respected. The eviction process moved forward, relentless. Robert sent me updates every 2 days. Michael had hired a cheap lawyer who tried to find technicalities to delay the inevitable. They argued the rent increase had been excessive, that certain protocols were not followed, that they deserved more time. But Robert had done everything to the letter. Every document was in order. Every notification had been delivered correctly. There was no escape. The eviction hearing is scheduled for next Thursday. Robert informed me one afternoon. It is a formality. With the documentation we have, the judge will rule in our favor. Your son will have to vacate within a maximum of 10 days after the ruling. I will be there, I said suddenly. Robert raised his eyebrows, surprised. At the hearing, it is not necessary, Mrs. Smith. I can represent you completely. In fact, it is better if you are not present. It maintains your anonymity. I want to be there in the room, but not as an involved party, just as an observer. Is it possible? He thought for a moment. Eviction hearings are public. Anyone can enter and sit on the back benches. As long as they do not recognize you, there is no problem. Thursday arrived with a gray sky threatening rain. I dressed carefully, choosing a dark gray tailored suit and an ivory silk blouse. I pulled my hair back in a low bun, put on my new glasses, a little discreet makeup. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman Michael would not recognize. I was no longer the hunched mother cooking soup in his kitchen. I was someone else, someone stronger. The courthouse was an old building with hallways smelling of old paper and stale coffee. I arrived early and sat on the last bench of courtroom 3 where the hearing would take place. There were other people waiting for their own cases, all with that expression of anxiety and fatigue the legal system produces. Michael arrived 15 minutes before the scheduled time. He came with Linda and his lawyer, a young man in a suit that had seen better days. My son looked terrible.
He had lost weight, had deep circles under his eyes, messy hair. Linda, on the other hand, was perfectly fixed up in an emerald green dress, too elegant for a courthouse, high heels, flawless makeup. But her expression was of barely contained fury. They sat in the front with their backs to me. I watched them like someone watching a play, distant, analytical. Linda whispered things in Michael's ear, sharp gestures, clearly annoyed. He just nodded, defeated, without the energy to argue.
His lawyer reviewed papers with a worried expression. Robert arrived exactly on time, impeccable in his black suit, leather briefcase in hand. He did not look at me, just as we had agreed. He sat on the other side, organized, confident. He knew his trade and knew he had a solid case. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with a severe expression and efficient movements. Case number 3,478, Heritage Holdings versus Michael Smith, announced the clerk. Michael's lawyer stood up first. He argued that the rent increase had been excessive, that his client had lived in the apartment for 5 years, with a good payment history, that he deserved special consideration. His voice sounded unconvincing even to himself. He knew he was losing. Robert stood up calmly. He presented the documents, the original contract, the increased notifications, the late payment notices, everything perfectly ordered. He explained that the special contract had been a courtesy of the previous owner, now deceased, and that the new administration had decided to normalize all rents to market price, completely legal, completely justified. Furthermore, Your Honor continued, Robert, the defendant, not only refused to pay the new rent amount, but accumulated 2 months of arrears. He paid under pressure of eviction on one occasion, but fell back into default immediately. This demonstrates a pattern of inability or lack of will to fulfill his contractual obligations. The judge reviewed the documents in silence. She looked at Michael. Mr. Smith, is it correct that you currently owe 2 months of rent under the new terms? Michael stood up with difficulty. Yes, Your Honor, but it is just that the increase was so sudden. We did not have time to adjust. If you could give us an extension, just 3 months, to Mr. Smith. The judge interrupted him with a firm tone. You were notified 30 days in advance about the change of terms, which is what the law requires. You had enough time to adjust or look for another place. Do you have the money owed at this moment? Michael looked at his lawyer, then at Linda, then at the floor. No, Your Honor, not at this moment. Then I have no other option than to rule in favor of the plaintiff. Mr. Smith, you have 10 days to vacate the property. If you do not do so voluntarily, forced eviction will proceed. Next case, the gavel hit the table. It was all over in less than 20 minutes. Michael stood paralyzed in his spot, as if he could not process what just happened. Linda exploded. This is unfair. You cannot do this. We have rights, she yelled toward the judge. But it was too late. The next case was being announced. Her lawyer took her by the arm, trying to get her out of the room before she was accused of contempt. Linda resisted, shouting incoherent things about corruption and abuse. Michael followed her in silence, dragging his feet, the very image of defeat.
They passed by my bench without looking at me. I was just another person in the room, invisible, irrelevant. I followed him with my gaze until they left. Then I stayed seated a few minutes more, letting the quiet settle. I had won. Legally, formally, I had won. But I did not feel the euphoria I expected. Only a kind of emptiness, like after a storm. I left the courthouse through a side door. Robert had told me he would wait for me at a nearby cafe. I found him at a back table, all ready, with 2 cups of coffee poured. "Well," he said when I sat down, "it went as we planned." "Yes." "How does it feel?" I thought about the question. How did I feel? Strange. I admitted finally, as if I had closed a door, but I still do not know what is on the other side. Robert nodded with understanding. "What you did today was not cruel, Mrs. Smith. It was just fair. Your son made decisions that brought him here. You simply let him face the natural consequences of those decisions. I know. Rationally, I know. But he is still your son," he finished. That never changes. Not even when they change. We drank coffee in silence. Robert did not pressure me to talk more. He was good at that, at knowing when silence was more useful than words. After a while, he took a folder out of his briefcase. "I have to show you something. It arrived this morning. A request from one of your other tenants in the Magnolia building." I opened the folder. It was a handwritten letter addressed to Heritage Holdings. It was written by a woman named Martha Gonzalez, tenant of apartment 105. She explained she was a single mother with 2 children working as a nurse on the night shift, that she had always paid her rent on time. She asked very respectfully if it was possible to reconsider the rent increase in her case, or at least stagger the increase over several months. She attached copies of her pay stubs, income proof reference letters from her employer. I read the letter twice. "What do you think?" I asked Robert. "It is your decision. Legally, you are not obligated to make exceptions, but this woman seems genuine and has a flawless payment history." I thought about Martha Gonzalez, whom I did not know working night shifts to support her children. I thought about how many times I had been in her position begging for a little consideration, a little grace. Accept her proposal, stagger the increase over 6 months, and tell her that if she continues paying on time, we will consider keeping her rent below market permanently. Robert smiled slightly. "That is very generous." "It is not generosity. It is recognizing the difference between someone who is genuinely struggling and someone who is just evading responsibility." I signed the approval right there. It was a line I had decided to draw. I would be tough on those who hurt me, on those who abused unearned privileges, but I would not become the kind of person who ignores real suffering. I would not become Linda. The following days were tense. Robert informed me of Michael's desperate attempts to reverse the decision. He had appealed, which would only delay things a week more. He had tried to get additional loans, but his credit was already destroyed. He had put ads up selling furniture, electronics, anything of value. The appeal was rejected in 3 days. The appeals judge did not even require a hearing. He just reviewed the documents and confirmed the original ruling. Michael now had less than a week to vacate. According to the private investigator, who was still monitoring the situation, my son and Linda had started packing, but the arguments between them had intensified dramatically. Neighbors report screaming every night, the investigator informed me by phone. Yesterday, Mrs.
Linda left the building with 2 suitcases and left in a taxi. She has not returned. Apparently, she is staying with a friend and Michael. He is still there alone, packing. One of the neighbors says she saw him crying in the hallway last night while carrying boxes to the elevator. The image hurt me more than I expected. My son alone crying while packing the remains of his life. But I did not call. I did not intervene.
This had to happen. He needed this breaking point. 2 days before the eviction deadline, Robert received an unexpected call. It was Michael, he told me when we met that afternoon. He wants to speak with the owner of the building. He says he has something important to say. He is begging for a meeting. What did you tell him that I would convey the message? He wants to see you. The question hung in the air between us.
Did I want to see my son? Did I want to hear what he had to say? A part of me, the part that never stopped being a mother, screamed, yes. But the other part, the wiser one, had doubts. Do you know what he wants to say? No, just that it is important, that he needs to explain something. I thought for a long minute. Tell him I will agree to see him, but not as his mother, as the representative of Heritage Holdings, and it has to be in a neutral place in your office tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Robert nodded. Do you want me to be present? No, I have to do this alone. That night, I did not sleep. I mentally practiced what I would say, how I would react. I stood in front of the mirror and rehearsed, keeping my expression neutral, firm, without betraying emotion. I had to be strong. I could not allow Michael to see the mother desperate for his love. He had to see the businesswoman I now was. At 2:30 in the afternoon the next day, I arrived at the firm. Robert had let me use his private office. I sat behind the desk in the black leather chair with the case documents in front of me. I had dressed impeccably, charcoal gray tailored suit, cream blouse, hair perfectly arranged, subtle but definitive makeup. I did not look like Helen. I looked like Mrs. Smith. At exactly 3 o'clock, I heard voices at the reception. My heart began to beat faster. The door opened, and Michael entered alone. He stopped dead when he saw me. For an infinite moment, we looked at each other in silence. I watched his brain process what his eyes were seeing. Confusion first, then disbelief. Finally, absolute shock. Mom, he whispered as if he were seeing a ghost. Sit down, Michael. My voice came out cold, controlled. It was not a mother's voice. It was an owner's voice. He staggered toward the chair in front of the desk, unable to look away from me. No, I do not understand.
What are you doing here? Why are you dressed like that? Where have you been? I looked for you, Mom. I called you, sent messages.
Lie.
The word cut the air like a knife. I checked my messages. 0 calls, 0 messages. After kicking me out of your house, you never contacted me again. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His eyes filled with tears. Linda said it was better to give you space, that you were angry. That with time, Linda said, I repeated with an icy tone. Michael, since when did you let your wife make decisions about your relationship with your mother? It was not like that. Things were complicated. The money, the work. Linda was stressed, Linda. And it was easier to forget about me than deal with your wife. It was not a question. It was a fact. He looked down, unable to deny it. The silence stretched heavy, suffocating. Finally, Michael looked up, and I saw something different in his eyes. A question taking shape. Mom, what are you doing here in this office dressed like that? Why did the lawyer let you use his office? I took a deep breath. This was the moment. I am not using his office. Michael, he lent it to me because I am his client. I am Heritage Holdings. The color drained from his face. What? The building where you live. The other 12 buildings in this city. The investments. The money. Everything is mine. Your father left it to me. It was always mine. And you have been paying rent to live in my property. Michael stood up so fast, the chair almost fell over. No, that cannot be. Dad never mentioned. Why didn't you say anything? Why would I have said anything? My voice rose slightly, allowing a little of the contained anger to surface. So that you and Linda would treat me like your landlady in addition to your servant, so you would ask for more favors, more discounts, more special considerations. We did not know, he shouted. If we had known that you... What? I interrupted him, standing up too. Would you have treated me better? Would you have respected me more? Michael, respect should not depend on how much money someone has. I was your mother. That should have been enough. He let himself fall back into the chair, head in his hands. His shoulders shook. He was crying. I am sorry, he sobbed. I am so sorry, Mom. I was a coward. I let Linda treat you badly. I let her kick you out. I turned up the volume on the television when she was hurting you because I did not want to face her, because it was easier to sacrifice you than risk my marriage. The words I had waited to hear for months had finally come out of his mouth, but I did not feel the satisfaction I expected. I just felt tiredness. And now, Michael, are you only sorry because you discovered I have money? Because I own the building where you live? Would you have come to apologize if you still thought I was a poor old woman without resources? He looked up, his face soaked in tears.
I do not know, he admitted with a broken voice. I do not know, Mom, and that is the worst part. I do not know what kind of person I became. I do not recognize the man who did those things, who left his mother on the street, who chose comfort over decency. At least he was honest. That was something. I sat down again, calmer. Your marriage is falling apart, right? He nodded miserably. Linda left 3 days ago. She says she is not going to stay with a loser who cannot even pay rent.
She says she deserves better, that all this is my fault. And what do you think? I think she is right. I think I am a loser. I lost my job 2 weeks ago. They fired me for being late constantly, for being distracted by the...
I have debts of over $40,000. My credit is destroyed, and in 2 days, I am going to be homeless. He laughed bitterly. Ironic, isn't it? I left you homeless, and now I am in the same situation. It is not ironic, I said softly. It is karma. He looked at me with red, swollen eyes. Have you come to see me suffer? Is that what you wanted? Revenge. The question stopped me. Was that what I wanted? I had spent weeks moving pieces, pulling threads, applying pressure. I'd watched my son crumble piece by piece. And now that he was here in front of me completely broken, did I feel satisfied? No, I said, finally surprised by my own answer. I did not want revenge. I wanted justice. I wanted you to understand what it feels like to be discarded, ignored, treated as if you were worth nothing. I wanted you to hit rock bottom so you could start rebuilding yourself the right way. And did I achieve it? He asked with a voice barely audible. I hit rock bottom. What do you think? He thought for a long moment. I think so. I think I cannot fall lower than where I am now. Without a job, without a wife, without money, without a home, without dignity, without you. The last 2 words came out as a torn whisper. I stayed silent, letting his words float between us. Michael had reached the bottom. I could see it in his eyes and the way his shoulders sank and how his hands shook on his knees. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment my son finally understood the weight of his actions. Do you know what was the worst of all, Michael? I said finally. It was not the hit with the ladle. It was not sleeping on the street. It was not looking for food in the trash. It was the sound of the television volume going up. It was knowing that my own son heard me scream in pain and chose to do nothing. He sobbed, covering his face with his hands. I am sorry. I am so sorry. If I could turn back time.
But you cannot. I interrupted him. No one can. We can only decide what to do with the time we have left. Michael looked up, hope and fear mixed in his expression. What is going to happen now?
I leaned back in the chair, studying him. My son, the baby I had carried in my arms, the boy who ran to me when he fell, the teenager who hugged me before leaving for college. All that was still there, buried under bad decisions and cowardice. But the man who had betrayed me was also there. Both versions were real. The eviction proceeds, I said firmly. I am not going to cancel it. You need to leave that apartment. You need to leave that life behind. His face crumbled. I understand. I have no right to ask you for anything. Just can I ask you something?
Where were you all these months? How did you survive before discovering the properties I told him? Not everything, but enough.
The nights in the square, the hunger, the cold, the machine that swallowed my last dollars. Every word was a dart I saw sticking into him. He needed to hear it. He needed to understand the full cost of his abandonment. When I finished, Michael was crying openly without trying to hide it. I failed you in the worst way possible. Dad must be ashamed of me. Wherever he is, he must hate me for what I did to you. Your father loved you, I said softly, even when you made mistakes, but he also knew that real love sometimes means letting people face the consequences of their actions. That is why he built this legacy for me, so I would have the resources to defend myself if I ever needed to. Are you ever going to forgive me? The question hung in the air. The truth was, I did not know. I do not know. Michael, forgiveness is not something I can force. It is not a switch I turn on because you finally apologized. It is a process. And first I need to see real change, not just pretty words born of desperation. He nodded, wiping tears with the back of his hand. What can I do? How can I show you? I have changed. It is not about showing me anything. It is about you becoming the man you want to be, the man your father would have been proud to call son. I stood up, indicating the meeting was over. You have 2 days to vacate. Use that time wisely. Michael stood up slowly, as if every movement cost him enormous effort. At the door, he stopped and turned. Mom, one last thing. When I find a place to stay, when I manage to fix my life, can I call you even just to know you are okay? I thought about my answer carefully. You can try, but I do not guarantee I will answer. Not until I see actions, not just words. He nodded, accepting the terms. Thank you for seeing me, for listening to me. I know I did not deserve it. And he left. I was left alone in the office, feeling the weight of what just happened. It had not been the explosive confrontation I had perhaps imagined. There were no screams or dramatic rejections, just the cold, hard truth served on a plate of inevitable consequences. The following days were spent in a kind of emotional limbo.
Robert informed me that Michael had vacated the apartment a day before the deadline. He had left the place clean, the keys delivered correctly. According to the building doorman, he had left in a taxi with only 3 suitcases and an expression of total defeat. "Do you know where he went?" I asked, hating myself for asking. "No, ma'am," he did not say. A part of me wanted to investigate, find out where he was, make sure he at least had a roof over his head, but I held back. Michael was an adult. He needed to solve this for himself. I could not keep rescuing him. Linda, for her part, had disappeared completely. According to my sources, she had returned to live with her parents in another city, blaming Michael for everything. She had posted things on social media about weak men and wasted time, but never mentioned her own role in the disaster. Typical. With the apartment vacant, I decided to make changes. I hired a designer and we completely renovated the space. New floors, fresh paint, modern appliances. Apartment 301 became the jewel of the building. I rented it in less than a week to a young professional for $3,000 a month. But the building was not the only thing that needed renovation. I did too. I decided it was time to leave the hotel and create a real home. I chose one of my properties, a small house in a quiet neighborhood with a garden facing south. It had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with large windows, and a wooden deck perfect for mornings. I spent weeks decorating it. I did not hire designers this time. I wanted to do it myself. I chose simple but elegant furniture. I hung Henry's photographs in the living room, but I also left space for new memories. I planted roses in the garden, tomatoes in pots, herbs by the kitchen window. I signed up for painting classes at a nearby community center. Turns out I was not terrible. My first attempts were disastrous blobs of color without shape or sense.